Two passengers remain in hospital after a plane flipped upside down on Monday during a crash landing at Toronto's International Airport. And new video shows the moment of impact. The Delta flight from Minneapolis skidding along the runway, flipping over as a wing rips off. The tail is engulfed in flames. All 80 people aboard survived, evacuated with minor injuries. The cause is under investigation. Meanwhile, more mass firings and layoffs from the Trump administration. This round focused on the Federal Aviation Administration as the US investigates multiple aeroplane disasters. For more on what's happening with the FAA as well as efforts to reform the agency, I'm joined by Keith Mackey. He's the president of Mackey International, an aviation consulting firm. Keith, great to have you on the show. What's your response to the recent firings of hundreds of FAA employees?
Well, thank you, Sally. I'm glad to be here. Actually, the FAA employs 45,000 people, more or less, and they fired 400 of them. All of them have been hired within the last year, and none of them were traffic controllers. Now, what has happened over the last year or so is on the FAA website, they've solicited people with handicaps, both mental and physical handicaps, to give them employment. Now, it's awfully hard to take someone who's not fully qualified and train them to be an air traffic controller. That's one tough job. So I think we may not want to use people that aren't skilled in the arts that it will take to do a good job as a controller. I think that may be part of it. So I don't think we've lost anybody that would be able to imminently solve any of the FAA staffing problems.
So in saying that, do you think that there are problems regarding the impact of these staffing changes on air travel, or should we expect some?
No, I don't think you're going to expect any more than you've normally had. There's always staffing shortages at the FAA. Usually the control centers are short-staffed because they just don't have the personnel that are qualified to do it. Additionally, the entire air traffic control system is a very old system using old technology. So we have to do things now manually that we may not have to do in the future if we automate the system a little more.
Right. So the Trump administration has said he wants to overhaul the, quote, outdated World War II era air traffic control system. Is that the motivation, do you think, or are there other factors at play here?
Well, I think they're looking for any waste in the government. A lot of money has been traced to places where they can't find where it went. They trace it till its point it's untraceable any longer. So there's an awful lot of that. For the last 30 years, the government has been promising to eliminate waste and get things back on an even keel so we're not throwing any money away. We need to keep the national debt down, not go any higher than what it is right now, and certainly wasting any money that can't be accounted is not a way to do it.
But what do you consider wasting money? I mean, if you're saying that there aren't enough personnel in some cases, you know, even the crash that we saw over the Potomac recently, allegedly the air traffic controller or the person responsible for communicating with the airplane was one man down in that circumstance. So where is the waste and where is hiring more personnel, you know, possible?
Well, waste is all over. For example, our Social Security system pays to eligible people until they're dead.
Just in terms of the FAA, what are you talking about in terms of financial waste there?
Well, the system needs to be updated. We need a new system to be able to accommodate the future as it goes on. And we're not moving in that direction yet. We need a plan.
Right. So you're saying the waste is in the outdated system and therefore it's not sufficient?
Correct. It's not going to serve us well in the future as time goes on.
Right. But are there potential conflicts of interest here, given that SpaceX's role as a significant government contractor? You know, do you think that the Trump administration should be addressing this first before hauling Elon Musk into the game?
Well, let's see. The only way we can get to space is with SpaceX. We have to send all our astronauts with SpaceX. SpaceX has the only system because NASA can't do it any longer, and our only other option to get a person in space is to hire a Russian rocket. So I think that this is probably a pretty important thing if we're going to progress in the direction that we need to as far as exploring space. And I think that what the FAA does and what SpaceX do are very unrelated things, other than they both go through the air and space.
But there surely are potentially
conflicts
of interest, especially in terms of regulation.
Well,
I mean, how do the regulatory bodies around the FAA, potentially conflict with SpaceX's role?
Well, none of the regulations we would normally use as aircraft operators or maintainers would apply to SpaceX. They're doing an entirely different thing.
Right.
That's very different for anything that we do. And the only problems I understand they've had with the FAA is scheduling problems. People didn't certify something when it was ready, and delayed SpaceX operations somewhat. And there's been an effort to fine them, I think, $620,000 for these unproven violations, but I don't believe they've paid any money yet.
There's a lot of, really quick policy change going on in the government right now. And with something like the FAA, where there are millions of travelers and hopeful travelers out there that are willing and ready to get on a flight, people might be nervous. What kind of measures are being implemented or should be implemented to ensure that the collaboration between the FAA and SpaceX adheres to the regulatory standards and maintains public trust?
Well, the regulatory standards are quite good. They just need to be modernized. When you consider, for example, with Boeing, there's a Boeing airplane taking off or landing once a second all around the galaxy, somewhere around the world. So that's an awful lot of flights and not many problems with serious delays.